You're watching Rogers TV.
Here we are at the London Food Bank. It's up getting to be evening time, and we're here for a very special event. Here's Mandi Fields. Now, a lot of this event is about you. You're going to be speaking from here in a little while, along with a whole bunch of other women from around the city and some men, which is great. What's the event?
Tonight is the 15-year anniversary of Tampon Tuesday, and we're also celebrating International Women's Day, Women's Week.
Yeah. I remember 15 years ago having those original discussions, and you came up with the idea, and I remember you went to a bunch of different partners and got some support, and now it's gone national, I think. How far across the country is it?
We're coast to coast. We are in 47 cities, coast to coast. We're in New York as well. California schools have picked up Tampon Tuesday, so we have a lot to be proud of.
And what's the core message of Tampon Tuesday?
Dignity.
Dignity.
Yeah. Absolutely. When these products aren't available for women, girls, for people who need them, it stops life. That's how I really believe that, because I know that, I lived it, and so it stops you going to school, going to work, going to that field hockey tournament, going to a sleepover.
Yeah. Well, Mandi, this is going to be part of a Food Bites episode. This will be the start of it, but we'll get into a little bit more about how you feel about it, how it all got started, who the various partners were. But we as a food bank, I mean, you're a rock star to us, and we really appreciate all that you've done for this, and it's helped thousands and thousands and thousands of women and girls that have come here for assistance. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for getting behind us.
Yep. So from that to this, here's poor Mandi in the middle of the warehouse at the food bank with all of these people. Now she's confined to this little box on a screen. But Mandi, we appreciate you taking the time and talking to us. It's awesome. You know, there were a lot of people there at the food bank to celebrate 15 years of Tampon Tuesday. And I remember those early days. I remember what you were trying to do and make a go of it. And you know, I wondered how you felt 15 years later. All of these people are coming and they're thankful for Tampon Tuesday, but they're really thankful for you and they celebrated you. How did you feel on that particular evening?
I was pretty overwhelmed. I felt a lot of joy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today, Glenn, so thank you.
Yeah.
And because the very first conversation happened at the food bank when we developed Tampon Tuesday. It happened with yourself and Jane, and then there was a town hall meeting. Or no, we were going to do a town hall, but then there was a meeting at CTV after that. And so the continuity of being with you and Jane from the moment of inception to 15 years later, and I thought it was very fitting for it to be at the food bank. And people were really kind. There's a lot of things with the Tampon Tuesday program that we haven't been able to talk about because of the role, my role at Bell Media, and when we developed it. It was only so far I could take it. And so I think it's really interesting, like 15 years later, how far have we come? You know, we have made some strides, but, you know, recently purchasing the product, whether it was for donation or personal use, you know, the cost hasn't come down at all. And so I still think that there's a lot of work to be done. And when I got home that evening, I thought about how I've never addressed how political women's bodies are, and never went into that space to talk about it. But just like the cost of being a woman. And we just never have really talked about that because there really hasn't been a space or an opportunity, because we really wanted Tampon Tuesday to be palpable for people to show up, to make a donation, so we could get these products to people who need them, you know, women and girls, people who menstruate, and make it really palpable, to make it a non-political space, to make it not an adversarial space, non-confrontational space, or really not a controversial space. So just show up, make a donation, network a bit, and go home. So I think now, 15 years later, we might have some opportunity to really have a bit some of the harder conversations around why are the cost of these products still so expensive.
So let's unpack that a bit then, because this is our chance to do so. I had Alex Summers from the health unit on a few weeks ago, and he talked about how he's really fighting for food neutrality, right? That we so politicized things like food. He felt that we just need to discuss that everybody needs food. That's the way that it is. But in the world of food banking, it is political. It's very much so, because social programs and those kind of things are largely what determines how many people come to the food bank. You know, the idea of how we get our food, or why food is so expensive in grocery stores and other places, those things are a large part of political design and economic system that makes things work. But unfortunately, as with so much else in any modern society, only some people can access those things because they have the wherewithal to do it. So while I appreciate very much what Alex was saying, and I agree with him, and I think he should pursue that as a model, we as the food banks, or food banks across the country, are becoming more political. And by that, I do not mean we're talking about parties or political leaders. I don't mention those folks in any of our shows. But the whole idea that public policy is so vital to how we function as a community. So I do, even we as a food bank are moving down that political thing more, because we have to. If you don't have policies, then all you have are the haves and have-nots. That's just the way it is. So unpack that for me a bit then, Mandi. You know, open it up. Some of the things you couldn't say before, you can say them here. I know you'll be circumspect about it, but I do think that's a fascinating field. What do you mean when you say it's political?
So in my, I know this is interesting, in my role at Bell Media, because some of our clients were Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, Johnson & Johnson, I could never really go for it in terms of the cost or lobby who are the decision makers on this price point. And so when I take a look at, when I'm at the grocery store and I take a look at steak, and so I'm there, I'm standing there, I'm in the meat counter, and I see the steak, and I see that little pad that's absorbing the blood from that steak. And I think about the cost of that pad that absorbs that blood, and then I think about Loblaws and Sobeys, et cetera, and I think about there is no way that absorbent, that material that absorbs the blood from the meat is anywhere close. It would be pennies. Like I can't even imagine what that actual price is. And when I compare that to menstrual hygiene products, and it really I find it quite upsetting, actually. And I don't know if there's ever been a study done, and I could be like way left field here when I think that there is a comparison. But when I look at when a friend hunts deer, and then I see the deer is butchered, and then we're given a bag of meat, and I see all that blood, and there's no pad there. There's no pad. And so when I think about that absorbent pad that's available in supermarkets on our meat, I really feel like we've been screwed as women. That people are just making money off our reproductive systems. And again, Glenn, you may never want to air this interview because it's finally a space that I feel like I can actually look into.
Yeah, and if I'm uncomfortable with it or not, and I'm not, but even if I was, this is your chance to finally break out of that kind of being careful before to being able to talk about it now. So I think this is an important discussion, not just because it's relevant, but because you've been feeling this for 15 years or longer, and now you finally get a chance to talk about it. So let's just keep going down that road. Initially, 15 years ago when we talked about it, and you talked about feminine hygiene products with people, or I did, right? At that time, It was a discussion that people were not really comfortable with having, with verbiage or things like, because we didn't talk about those things. I think Tampon Tuesday has done a lot to change that dynamic, not just because it's out there more and it's more acceptable, but more men are part of that system of trying to help to promote it and are involved at various levels throughout it. So I presume you would find the language that you use a bit easier because people are more accepting of it. But the implications of the language are what's really more difficult now. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but can you explain that a bit?
Mm-hmm. I think I know what you're talking about. I mean, for the longest time, the program, we would say feminine hygiene products.
Yeah.
And at some point, I was approached by the Pride Committee, the local Pride Committee in London. They were the first group to approach me and ask me to consider changing, instead of using the word feminine, to menstrual hygiene products. So it was a more inclusive space, and to also include this product is for women and girls and people who menstruate. And we, very willing, like I thanked the folks that came forward, and I thought it was great. And it was a great education, and there was certainly no resistance from us to make that change. Certainly I've seen more men come to Tampon Tuesday. With the first 6-7 years, we ran the program without sponsorship. When Shoppers Drug Mart became the presenting sponsor, the majority of the pharmacists and owners were men. And so that's when we really saw the shift in the demographic, that actually who attended a Tampon Tuesday was more men, because our presenting sponsors, the majority of them were men who attended. Where I've seen a real shift, and part of it has to do with COVID, because Tampon Tuesday was really hitting its stride pre-COVID. We were getting 300 people out to events, as you know. We were attracting, members of parliament, mayors, people of distinction wanted to be associated with Tampon Tuesday. And COVID really did affect us. We're an event. And so that pivot, even though now we've gone back to events, we have not been able to recoup the numbers. But another thing that I did want to talk about today, and I appreciate you saying, we can talk about what you want to talk about, things that you haven't been able to state. Pre-COVID, when Minister Patty Hajdu, when she was the Minister of Health, I was invited to a roundtable in London, Ontario, and that was because of both Kate Young and Peter Fredskatos. I'm going to guess because of you too. I don't know if you had something to do with me being invited. I believe that Minister Hajdu at the time, she believed that this notion of period poverty and these grassroots programs came from a program in British Columbia. And Peter and Kate were very clear that no, actually, this grassroots movement, this conversation actually started in London, Ontario, which I think is Peter and Kate's riding, if I'm understanding the zones correctly. Mm-hmm. So I'm in this meeting, and I was really cautious about the conversation that was going to take place, because I really felt so strongly, and continue to this day, because I knew the direction was going, that these products would be offered free in federally regulated buildings. And my fear, and it truly is a fear, is that if there would be an announcement made that these products were free in federally regulated buildings, then people would just think they're free, but they're not free to those who can't afford them. So if I'm working for a federally regulated building, which I just did, the products all of a sudden magically appeared in the washrooms. That's awesome, but I can afford them. My fear lies in the space where the public believes that these products are free everywhere, which of course they're not. Mm-hmm. And that's why the need for Tampon Tuesday and Period Purse and Here for Her, et cetera, those programs are so important, because it actually doesn't address the poverty piece. And that was my fear. And I don't know if the correlation of COVID plus messaging that these products are free in federally regulated buildings because there has been a decline in attendance to Tampon Tuesday, and so therefore a decline in donations. But we are not addressing the poverty piece by the direction we're on.
So just to be honest, I had nothing to do with that decision to have you there. I mean, that was all Peter and Kate, and more credit to them for doing so. But, there's some bit of a corollary here with the food bank. The food bank is now entering its 39th year, right? I can remember the first food drives that we had. There was not a feminine hygiene product to be found in any of the donations, right? It just wasn't there, and it wasn't done. And when it began to happen is when we spoke out more about it. This is before Tampon Tuesday. But, the women that were coming in to us, and most of the people who were coming to the food bank were females. They weren't males, right? So they were coming in, they were saying, look, we can't afford some of these things, and we appreciate it. But baby formula was one. It was hugely expensive. So we did an education program around that. And then the hygiene products, menstrual products, those kind of things. We did programs around that too. And it began to increase and increase. And so we're thankful for that. Tampon Tuesday blew it out of the water. I mean, your efforts and all that happened was great. So we now see a lot of that coming in. Shoppers, Drug Mart, and others were just terrific at helping us to get those products. But it's also true that out there, when people think of food, they think, well, if somebody can't afford food, just go to the food bank. Right? Mm-hmm. That's not how a society is supposed to work. People are supposed to be able to afford these things that are necessary or essential, whether it's water or whatever it is, right? So I think it's really true what you're saying. The problem is, I think, the moment you get out into the public domain, you are now into the political domain. Automatically,
yes.
That's just there. And so, you're going to find all sorts of suddenly different opinions entering into it now, political parties entering into it. That's just the way that it is. Mm-hmm. These things are essential to a way of life. Jane and I, just forgive me for a second, but we have two girls that come from Sudan. And if they were there now and they were in the time of their period, for instance, they would have to be off to the side, kept away, not allowed to come into public gatherings. And, we would look at that kind of thing now and say that's crude. That's from a bygone era. And yet that practice still continues to happen because women might not be able to afford products and therefore can't go out and do the things that they would like to do. I sense that you are comfortable now in moving more out into that political sphere, but it's whether it's the environment or whether it's water, whatever it is, these things all of a sudden have a cost on them. Right? There's a price for these things. And as a result, people who can't afford to get it, it's a real problem. So I realize you're more comfortable at speaking out about this, but have you developed any new kind of strategies or things like that as to how to use this new, maybe more powerful kind of language to try to make even further moves ahead in this field of the products? I'm interested in your view.
Today marks 1 month of being released from my work. I still haven't figured out quite how to say my services are no longer required. But when one door closes, another one opens. So I don't know yet the language, but I know I'm going there. I think that will be part of, because I just really believe the products should be affordable. Even when I'm at a grocery store and I see the cost of toilet paper and how much toilet paper I can buy versus like that one small box of pads or tampons, it's just it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And I think that there's enough of us out there who believe in this that we could champion it and ask the hard questions about why these products that girls, women, and people who menstruate require, and see how we reduce the price. I've never done that before, so it will be new space for me, but I'm not afraid of spaces I don't know. And I know even saying this now, I feel all these people behind me. I know I wouldn't be alone if I did make a decision to start lifting up some rocks, to ask those hard questions, and to stay there front and center.
Yeah, and as someone who's been at this for 4 decades, Mandi, I do believe that there is a place, like even for food now. We don't need to sit down there and all start talking about political leaders and political parties and really starting to hammer. What we're really trying to go for is affordable products, right?
That's it.
We're not asking for these things. No, I get that. And I think that there's a real safe political language in that, to be honest with you. For instance, the United Way came out a few weeks ago and called upon the government, the provincial government, to double social assistance rates just to bring people to the poverty line.
Yeah.
They need to have a double social assistance rates to get there. And the reason why United Way did that is because how can people possibly afford to live if this is the way it stays? Then you do get Alex Summers from the health unit speaking up about the need for food and other things, health, those kind of things, to go out there so that people can afford them, because we're all paying the price when they can't. So that's really important, and others across the country are doing the same. So I don't think you immediately move from doing something like Tampon Tuesday or a food bank and suddenly you move into the political realm. You're entering into the public realm, right?
Yeah.
But the public realm now is just a little bit closer to the political world. But you're always safe, I think, when you say, look, I'm asking for things to be affordable. And there's only 2 ways you can do that. Help people that don't have the resources. How would they gain those resources? Get them work, get them access, whatever it is. And then also make, the companies themselves, like the public is trying to do now around grocery stores, make them bring those costs down, because the profit margins are now so high, right? And we all know it, and people are upset because they themselves are going to the store and paying these prices. So I think it's really smart of you to speak up, speak out, but also to understand you in many ways, when you're in the public space, you're in a safe space, because you're surrounded by more than half of this country are women that know exactly what you're talking about. Right? So
exactly.
I think you've got strength there.
Thank you. And I really would, like at the last Tampon Tuesday on Tuesday, there was honestly a big part of me that really did want to show those meat pads, those absorbent pads with lactates, and do our own commercial and pour the liquid onto them to actually showcase. And I think it's true. I guess if anything, Glenn, it's just a little disappointing. So sometimes when you see things and then you're kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm actually looking at that. I can actually see that, and then actually really feeling quite disappointed in all of it, But it's a new day, right?
Yes, but I think so many people have your backs. I've noticed that, and I've known it over the years. You and I and your husband Kenny and Jane have known one another a long time, and it's been great. But I have seen so many people behind you. I saw it again this last week at the food bank for the Tampon Tuesday event. But I think the reason why so many are behind you is not because it's just a cause. I think it's because it makes sense. It makes sense economically. It makes sense publicly for people, right? It makes sense from a health standpoint, a tolerance and openness point of view, an open society. So I think it makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm glad you're kind of freed and liberated, and the bridle is kind of taken off from the previous position you were in to be able to do it. But I'll just be honest, I have known many people who go straight from that to the political realm. And as they do all of that, the public doesn't get a chance to assess it on its merits. They assess it on what political party is supporting it and what isn't. And I really am thankful that you're in the middle of all of that, in the journey that you're at. You're helping people to understand that what you're talking about, much as the food bank tries to do about making products affordable for people, that is a very safe space if we wish to stay in it and have open talks about it. It's very safe. But the moment we get out there and are a little bit harsher, talking maybe about companies or talking about politics or whatever it is, that will happen. But you've got to come from that safer area to do it. And I think you're really in a sweet spot about that, Mandi. I think that language will become so much more refined in you, and it's refined now, but it'll come even more so. But the point is such an open space that many people can come into it. It's not owned by somebody else. Right. And I'm looking forward to seeing how you deal with that. Do you get that sense that that opportunity is there, or you're still thinking, I don't know, I'm just going to test it out and see how it is?
This is the first time publicly I've stated this opinion. And I think, I think we've got to go for it. I think we've got to look at it. It's too expensive. It's just too expensive. $12.99 for one box, it's just too expensive. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I can buy 24 rolls of toilet paper for $5.49, and I can get 24 tampons for $12.49.
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense at all.
No. But it has to, in order to be successful, it has to a certain degree become a movement. And I think that that's what you've done with Tampon Tuesday. For instance, how many locations is it in? It started in London, but how many locations is it in now?
You know, I am proud to say I don't know. In a good way, I don't know, because on Wednesday night, so I don't Google Tampon Tuesday. I don't know. So, but I did the day after our 15-year anniversary, and I was, feeling the love, but also wow, the decision that I'm no longer working for the company. I Googled Tampon Tuesday, and I was in bed, and I'm scrolling, Glen, page after page after page after page, literally after page of Tampon Tuesday events all across this country and in the United States. Last count, I heard that it was 47 cities, but it's gone, in a good way, right? In a most beautiful way. I've always thought Tampon Tuesday was a butterfly, and that you couldn't quite catch it, right? That once, because you always need a driver in each city. Once you got a driver who kind of hooked onto it, who was just aha, and they would take it. It's so beautiful to see, and it really is like a butterfly. You can't catch it. It wouldn't be good for the community if someone tried to catch it and keep it tamed. Yeah. So many. So I don't see that slowing down at all, because people show up, the impact is met, and then you get the products to people who need it. But the supply and demand will always be there. People will always menstruate. Women will always menstruate. In the face of poverty is female. So we're not going anywhere. It's always going to be there.
And am I right in saying that this has now moved into the States as well? Did I hear that from somebody? Yeah? Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. There's some schools in California, Columbia University. Where else? I mean, New York Times.
Yeah.
Pardon?
You should Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. New York Times did a shout out about us in 2015. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So then might have gotten some traction then.
Well, if any place that should have traction is here in London, Ontario, because of you, Mandi. You started it all, and you got some big partners in there. You wouldn't have been able to do it without them. You also had people that nobody knew who they were, and they were your partners as well in working with you. And much of the success is owed to them, and that the fact that they were still out there 15 years later supporting you this last week. So I think it is a public movement in a public space that has political and economic risks there when you do it, when you use that as the message. But the point is, it is in the public space, and it's growing. Mandi, we owe you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry about what's happened on the employment front, but I have a hunch. Once I got out of firefighting and went into politics, I thought the whole world was in front of me, and it was a difficult world because it was so divided. But then once I got out of that and came back to this community, I found it was wide open. It was wide open for these. Yeah. And you're testing that same thing, and you're finding out that to be true as well. It's awesome.
Thanks for always being by my side. Truly. Thank you. It's an honor.
This program